We will build on.
Starmer, a pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
Bit collective
it's
action.
Not in your pledge.
Well, the pledge is 3 lines, Andrew. You're asking me for more detail and I'm giving it to you.
Well, but the fact is the 2016 Trade Union Act, when it comes to cribbing and curtailing union power, is not the key legislation, because you're hiding behind the process.
No, the Labour Party
Why don't you do what the other candidates do and tell? Don't Labour members have a right, as they decide whether to vote for you or not? They want to.
So
can I bring you back to my question? What would Labour do?
Well, we've already talked about, some of the taxation decisions that the government have made around inheritance tax, capital gains tax, corporation tax, where you've given away money. Okay. This is what Jeremy was talking about in Prime Minister's question today. You've given away money that actually, quite frankly, we need to spend. And it's not just about an ageing population. That is phony. People know about the ageing population for some time. We've cut the criteria so people can't get community care. We treat our older people at the moment like dogs. It's a disgrace. We shouldn't do that.
But, excuse
we should
me,
be investing and putting the money in the primary care
Would you
services.
reverse the cuts on corporation tax?
I think that the cuts on corporation tax are missing a point because we need that money. We need that money at the moment.
Would you reverse it?
In the real sense of political demolition, nothing, and we mean nothing, comes close to Andrew Neil's savage takedown of Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. One minute they were parroting talking points with forced smiles, the next Neil was peeling them apart like a pack of budget sausages at a vegan convention. Starmer blinked like his auto cue betrayed him. Rayner tried to dodge with sass, but Neil came armed with facts, fury, and a smirk. What happened next? Pure, unscripted carnage? Buckle up.
It's still not a huge fan of NATO by any means, and I think that's danger for a wider Europe. At a time when Olaf Scholz in Germany is already part of the walking wounded, and now Macron is a lame duck, to have a government in Paris that is not a fan of NATO and has a soft spot for Russia, where does the leadership come from? Because I tell you this, it isn't going to come from Keir Starmer, who is a novice when it comes to geopolitics and foreign politics.
Would you reverse them?
I think that at the moment, cutting at a time where we need those services and people need those services is the wrong decision to make.
But I'm asking you, would you reverse the cut in corporation tax?
But I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is
you're not telling me the question.
I am. I'm saying that the cuts in corporation tax, the cuts in inheritance tax, the cuts in capital gains tax.
But what's the cut in capital gains tax?
But what's really important, Andrew...
No, excuse me, I'm asking you a question. What's the cut in the capital gains tax?
They've cut the capital gains tax. They did that. They did that as part of the coalition government.
No, they raised the capital gains tax in the
Keir Starmer once said he'd bring integrity back to British politics. That's like promising a salad will fix a sinking ship. Noble, delusional, and entirely unhelpful. And just when you thought the Labour Party couldn't get more beige, Angela Rayner shows up, clinging to working-class credentials like a 2005 Primark receipt that somehow survived 5 wash cycles and a Brexit referendum.
There are a lot of fundamental issues which need to be tackled in our country. A lot of them are allowed just to atrophy under the Conservatives. They are not of any reforming zeal. But given the scale of problems that we face, from health to infrastructure and so on, he just doesn't have the blueprint.
Now enter Andrew Neil, the political bloodhound in human form. This is the man who treats political spin like it's a pest infestation. He doesn't ask questions, he surgically dismantles careers with syllables. And Keir Starmer walks straight into that intellectual blender, like a man trying to prove he could walk through a revolving door without turning it.
It was a tough gig for the Chancellor, but I think she's taking a much bigger gamble than people realise. In her spring statement, which is only 3 months ago, less than that, the Chancellor said that you couldn't tax and borrow your way to prosperity and better public services. But that is exactly...
Starmer's idea of strong leadership? Whispering vague promises while staring blankly into the political void like he's auditioning for a role as the human equivalent of wallpaper. No policies, no passion, just the sound of softly humming bureaucracy. And somehow, despite the entire Tory party being locked in a self-combusting clown car, Labour under Starmer still manages to poll like a charity raffle ticket at a billionaire's golf tournament.
If you really want to know how to fix the things in the organisation that aren't working, ask your junior staff. And I asked them 2 questions routinely. The first was, what's the biggest challenge that you've got every day you do your job? And the second, when's the last time your manager said thank you to you? And that was really revealing. And it was such an insight into how you lead people.
And then Angela Rayner, the self-declared voice of the working class, parachutes in with her own brand of political poetry, which sounds suspiciously like someone trying to read Karl Marx through the lens of Love Island. Her strategy? Slag off the Tories using words longer than 3 syllables, because nothing says revolution like a thesaurus and an ASBA.
What is the Deputy Prime Minister's definition of working people?
The definition of working people are the people that the Tory party have failed for the last 14 years.
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister stood on a manifesto promising not to raise taxes on working people. It now appears she can't even define who working people are. So I'll give her another go. There are 5 million small business owners in this country. Are they working people?
I don't know how the shadow Deputy Prime Minister can stand there with a straight face when it was the small businesses, the working people of this country that paid the price of them crashing the economy, sending interest rates scoring. I think he needs to learn his own lesson.
Andrew Neil sat them down. Metaphorically, because let's face it, Starmer wouldn't agree to a real interview unless it came with a fire escape and plausible deniability. But the roasting began anyway. Neil didn't just grill Starmer, he slow roasted him with the kind of quiet intensity you reserve for your worst enemy at a family barbecue. First up, Starmer's grand vision. A Britain where everything gets better through the sheer force of spreadsheet enthusiasm. He's got all the charisma of a Microsoft Excel tutorial and the leadership instincts of a malfunctioning GPS. One minute it's make Brexit work, the next it's respect the referendum, then it's negotiate like grown-ups, all while blinking like someone who just lost Wi-Fi signal in a tunnel of bad decisions. Neil, armed with receipts longer than Rayner's expense claims, dismantled Starmer's flip-flopping faster than a cheap IKEA shelf in a flood. He brought up Starmer's record as Director of Public Prosecutions, the supposed crown jewel in the Labour leader's resume, a time when, allegedly, he stood tall for law and order. Except, of course, when he stood sideways, backward, or didn't stand at all.
They were so pious and sanctimonious about the Tories when they were in opposition, and they had plenty to have a go at on the Tories, no question about that. But it's now come back to bite them. The Sue Gray thing, I think, is a bit more worrying because it suggests that Keir Starmer doesn't have control of Downing Street in the way he should. And of course, that brought Boris Johnson down. He didn't have control of Downing Street.
You know you've lost the plot when Andrew Neil starts quoting your own manifesto back at you like it's evidence in a criminal trial. Starmer blinked, metaphorically. He always blinks. It's like a tick, except instead of facial muscles, it's his entire ideology having a nervous breakdown. Then came the topic of public spending. Starmer wants to fund the NHS, improve education, lower crime, boost infrastructure, hug a tree, pet a dog, and still keep taxes lower than Rishi Sunak's chances of winning a dance-off. Magic money tree? Try a fantasy forest with unicorns handing out free childcare and inflation-proof dreams. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader who speaks like every sentence ends in a mic drop, thinks shouting louder makes the policy better. Her big contribution to the budget discussion? Accusing the rich of everything short of stealing her parking spot. Rayner seems to believe the entire economy can be rebuilt by taxing billionaires until they explode into packets of social justice. Neil pointed out the minor detail that even if you tax the rich into oblivion, you still wouldn't fund Rayner's promises for more than a long weekend. Her response? Imply it's the patriarchy's fault. And double down on the hope that no one notices Labour hasn't released a full-costed manifesto since Ed Miliband tried to seduce the electorate with a stone tablet.
What I'm saying, Andrew, and
what you're saying is wrong. They raised the capital gains tax to 28%.
What I'm saying is that they've given tax cuts to absolutely the richest in the country at the same time where they've told the poorest people in this country over the past, it is true, at the same time that you've told the people in this country over the last 6 years, we've got to cut our coffee. No, let me finish this point because you've...
And speaking of costings, let's talk about Labour's big green energy plan, a proposal so vague you could mistake it for a horoscope. Starmer keeps saying it'll create jobs, cut emissions, save the planet and probably give us all better Wi-Fi. The actual details hidden somewhere between a consultant's PowerPoint and a black hole of accountability. Rayner, meanwhile, tells us Labour's energy plan is ambitious. which is like calling Elon Musk quirky. Ambition without clarity is just a recipe for glitter bombs and disappointment. Even Neil, who could have been carved from granite, arched an eyebrow so sharply it nearly filed its own FOI request. Then there's the small matter of party discipline. Starmer claims to be the adult in the room, which is interesting because his front bench behaves like the cast of a soap opera written by interns on Red Bull. Shadow ministers contradict each other in interviews like it's a team-building exercise, and policy announcements get retracted faster than Tory apologies. And yet Starmer's approach to leadership is silence, majestic, awkward, prolonged silence. Like he's hoping if he doesn't speak, no one will notice the Labour Party is still wandering the ideological desert like a hungover Moses with a focus group.
I think the worry is that if you end up with this Labour supermajority, as some people are saying there will be, that they'll ram through changes, whether that's votes at 16, the levels of taxes they want to bring forward, the pensions they want to raise, their energy policies, which I think would be really disastrous for this country. So what we're saying is there's thousands of people across the country who can make a huge difference. So when it comes to July the 4th, your vote does matter, and we'd like you to vote Conservative. I do think it's really important that lots of people across the country are really worried about what Labour would do, whether that's the fact that they won't commit to defence spending, whether it's their plans of energy which are going to raise people's bills, or the fact they will raise taxes and raise your pension. Lots of people are concerned, and for those people they might think the election is a foregone conclusion, but it's not, and actually it is just a handful of people across the country who can make a huge difference.
Meanwhile, Angela Rayner's leadership strategy is to take every microphone like it owes her money. She charges into interviews like a boxer with a sociology degree, armed with half-memorised stats and moral outrage so aggressive it qualifies for its own postcode. But once you scrape off the passion, there's usually just echoes. Loud, righteous, echoing vagueness. Andrew Neil didn't need to break a sweat. Starmer and Rayner melted under basic scrutiny like waxworks left in the sun. Neil mentioned Labour's immigration stance, a policy so elusive it might as well be hiding in a witness protection programme. Starmer wants fairness, firmness and humanity. In reality, what we get is ambiguity, hesitation and the political equivalent of a shrug emoji. Then came law and order. Starmer used to be head of public prosecutions, remember? So naturally, Labour's crime policy is an unintelligible cocktail of buzzwords, unfunded promises and optimistic graphs. Rayner's take? More bobbies on the beat. Paid for by, you guessed it, those pesky billionaires again. They must be magic. Every time Labour needs money, they just shake a rich person until solutions fall out like political piñatas. Neil also highlighted Labour's U-turns on tuition fees, on nationalisation, on literally anything that involves choosing a side. Starmer's favourite position is every position. He's a one-man policy buffet, offering something for everyone and satisfying no one. You can't pin him down. Not because he's clever, but because he's slippery, like political Teflon, but less exciting.
Britain can't afford any more of the Conservatives. And he seems to have lost count. The answer is a quarter. Only a quarter of the billions of pounds of taxpayers' money lost to fraud is expected to be clawed back. If this government can't get the public money back, they can't be trusted with anything.
Angela Rayner tried to anchor the party with her working-class hero routine, but let's not forget, she's now part of the same establishment she claims to be smashing. Designer handbags, tax-funded expenses and front-row seats to every photo shoot pretending to be a pub visit. It's the new face of class warfare, gentrified rebellion. And while Starmer is busy polishing his neutral expression, Angela is retweeting motivational slogans like she's prepping for a TED Talk titled, "How to Yell About Injustice While Wearing Gucci." If Labour was a Netflix series, Starmer would be the slow burn political drama nobody watches past episode 3, and Rayner would be the chaotic subplot that gets a spin-off for being accidentally entertaining. Andrew Neil didn't destroy them with shouting, he did it with precision. Like a cat playing with mice, he casually dropped fact after fact, exposing contradictions like he was peeling layers off an onion of mediocrity. Jack Starmer's record? Inconsistent. His policies? Incoherent. His passion? MIA since 2020. Rayner tried to compensate by turning up the volume, but when Neil asked for specifics, her response was basically, "Trust us, we're not the Tories." A compelling pitch if your bar for leadership is simply not currently on fire.
You've all taken a 2.8% pay rise as agreed by the MP's pay review body.
The pay review body is independent.
Hang on a sec, is that particularly working class? All those things taken together? Is that working class?
All those things taken together, Tom, I've just explained to you, the winter fuel allowance people are over £400 better off because we protected the triple lock, we protected the most vulnerable. I've just explained to you the welfare and the principles and the values that we will protect those that need it and make sure that they get the support, and we've got to make sure that people can get into work. And in terms of the pay rise, MPs do not have any control over that. That is completely independent of...
And let's not forget Labour's recent local election campaign, a masterclass in promising everything to everyone while simultaneously saying nothing at all. They handed out leaflets with more buzzwords than a Silicon Valley pitch deck and followed up with interviews that left voters wondering if anyone in the party had ever actually met a working class person who wasn't in a focus group. Starmer's entire strategy now seems to be hope that the Tories implode faster than he does, hope that no one remembers what he said last week, hope that if he just frowns hard enough, people will mistake it for conviction. Rayner's strategy is pure adrenaline. Her speeches are fiery, sure, but after the flames die down, all you're left with is scorched earth and unanswered questions. It's like watching someone shout into a megaphone in an empty room and then claim victory because the echo agreed with them. Andrew Neil didn't reinvent the wheel here, he just rolled it down the hill and watched Starmer and Rayner trip over it. He didn't need to break them. They came pre-broken, assembled, with contradictions, inflated promises, and enough rhetorical fluff to stuff a mattress. Labour under Starmer is like a fancy bottle of water. Slick packaging, premium branding, but still just water with a price tag that makes you question your life choices. And Rayner? She's the cap that promises carbonation, but only delivers a hiss.
In a sense, Reform have already won these local elections because they are contesting virtually every seat. Now, arguably, the Labour government's decision to cancel some of the elections was, although Reform were very unhappy about some of the places where they hoped to do well and no longer having elections, on the other hand, it meant that they could focus on a very small part of the country in order to be able to create their first steps towards creating a party organisation.
By the time Neil was done, what remained wasn't a party in waiting. It was a disoriented pair of politicians blinking through the smoke of their own implosion, still clutching talking points like talismans that forgot to work. Keir Starmer says he wants to lead a government of competence. That's fantastic. Once he finds out what his policies are, how to stick to them, and how not to combust when someone named Andrew Neil walks into the room with a clipboard. As for Angela Rayner, her brand of defiant populism would be charming if it didn't collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. Working class champion turned political celebrity shouting about injustice from inside a chauffeur-driven car. So here we are. The Tories are collapsing, but Labour is too scared to celebrate in case someone asks them what they actually believe. And, in the middle of it all, Andrew Neil, the political undertaker, continues to deliver eulogies in the form of televised interrogations. Maybe one day, Starmer and Rayner will find a vision that isn't focus grouped into oblivion. Until then, they'll keep stumbling through the spotlight, haunted by the ghost of accountability, forever dodging the one man who can turn a polite question into a career-ending moment of silence.
And when a Prime Minister has to say, look, I'm in control, when he has to say that less than 3 months in power, you know it's a real mess. You know it's in real trouble. When he had normally Prime Ministers say, I'm in control in their dying days. That's not in their first 3 months. As you know, as everybody at Times Radio knows, I mean, the briefing, the competitive briefing is unbelievable. I mean, I wrote it at the weekend. There's so much briefing going on about Sue Graham. I'm slightly puzzled as to why they...
And if you thought that was harsh, just wait until Neil gets them both in a room again, bring popcorn, and maybe a dictionary, because someone's going to need help explaining what integrity actually means. What's left after Neil's surgical takedown? A hollow parade of ambition dressed in borrowed conviction, wobbling through Parliament like a toddler in oversized boots. No guiding philosophy, just reactive politics wrapped in corporate slogans and recycled promises. Behind every declaration lies a hesitancy, a fear of alienating someone, anyone, with a firm opinion. Leadership without risk, passion without purpose. Starmer and Rayner may speak of progress, but deliver confusion. Neil didn't expose them with tricks, he simply turned on the lights. And what we saw wasn't a government in waiting. It was a couple of careerists trying to bluff their way through a credibility crisis.